The air was thick with the sweet, heavy smell of lilies and the quiet murmurs of people saying things they didn't mean to a person who couldn't hear them. My father's funeral. The words felt wrong in my head. I stood in a black dress that felt too tight, my heart a hollow, aching space in my chest. Friends of my father, distant cousins and neighbors I hadn't seen in years came to me one by one. They would wrap their arms around me, their hugs feeling like they were for someone else. "He's in a better place," they'd whisper. "He was such a good man." I knew he was a good man. He was the best man. He was my whole world. And now he was gone. I would nod and say, "Thank you for coming," my voice sounding like it belonged to a stranger. My husband, Alex, was supposed to be by my side, holding my hand, being my rock, but he was always moving, drifting through the crowd, offering a sad smile here, a comforting hand on a shoulder there. He was playing the part of the grieving son-in-law perfectly. I felt a buzz in my pocket. My phone. For a second, I was grateful for the distraction, a reason to look away, to escape the sea of sad faces. I pulled it out, expecting a text message of condolence from a friend who couldn't make it. But it wasn't a text. It was a notification from my bank. I frowned. That was strange. I never got alerts unless there was a large transaction. I opened the app, my thumbprint unlocking the screen. The numbers on the screen didn't make sense at first. They looked like a mistake, a glitch in the system. Account balance, $0. I blinked, reading it again. 0. A perfect empty circle. Every last dollar. My savings. The money I had worked for years to put away. And the inheritance. The money my father had left me. The money that had only arrived in my account 2 days ago. Everything. Gone. My blood turned to ice. The quiet murmurs of the room faded into a loud ringing in my ears. It couldn't be a mistake. A transfer that large, cleaning out an entire account, had to be done by someone with access. There were only 2 people with access to that account, me and my husband. My head snapped up. My eyes flew across the crowded room, searching for him. I found him standing near the fireplace, talking to my cousin. He looked so handsome in his dark suit, his face a perfect mask of sorrow. He must have felt my stare because he turned his head and his eyes met mine. And then he did it. He smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was tiny, almost invisible to anyone else. It was a quick, cruel twist of his lips. It was a secret message sent across a room full of mourners, a message just for me. It was a smile of victory. It said, "I did it. And what are you going to do about it? You're broken. You have nothing left." He picked the worst day of my life to betray me. He was certain I would fall apart. He expected me to scream, to cry, to collapse right here on the polished wooden floor. I could feel the scream building in my throat, a hot, painful thing. The tears burned behind my eyes, but then something else happened. Through the fog of my grief, I heard my father's voice. It was from a week ago, when he was lying in his bed, his own voice weak but his eyes still so sharp. "Clara," he had whispered, holding my hand. "I hope I am wrong about him, but hope is not a plan. Remember what I told you. Remember the promise." The scream died. The fire behind my eyes cooled into something hard and clear. The giant, gaping hole in my heart was still there, but now something was standing at its edge. It was a promise I had made to my father. I looked straight across the room, into my husband's triumphant eyes. He was still watching me, waiting for the show. He was waiting for me to break. So I gave him a show, but it wasn't the one he was expecting. I smiled back. My smile felt like a strange, foreign thing on my face. It was a mask, and behind it, my mind was racing. I turned away from Alex, breaking the silent war we had just declared across the room. I couldn't stay here. I couldn't breathe in this air thick with fake sympathy and the smell of dying flowers. I found my aunt and whispered that I needed a moment alone. She nodded with understanding eyes, thinking I was going to a quiet room to cry. She was wrong. I walked through the house, my steps steady. Each step took me further from the woman who had been numb with grief and closer to the daughter my father had raised. Grief was a heavy cloak, but purpose was a suit of armor being built around me, piece by piece. My mind went back to a week ago. My father was in his bed in his study, the room that smelled of old books and leather. He was thin and pale, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as ever. He had called me in and asked me to sit beside him. "Clara," he had said, his voice a dry whisper. He pointed to a heavy, dark leather briefcase under his desk. "I want you to have this." "Dad, don't talk like that," I had said. My voice choked with tears. He shook his head, a small, impatient gesture. "Listen to me. I hope I am wrong about him, I truly do, but hope is not a plan." He looked me straight in the eye. "I don't trust Alex. A man who spends money he doesn't have is a man who will take money that isn't his. A man like that leaves tracks." I had wanted to defend my husband. I had wanted to say that he loved me, that he was just bad with money sometimes. But I saw the certainty in my father's eyes. He knew something. He saw something I had refused to see. "I want you to promise me something," he continued, his grip on my hand surprisingly strong. "Do not open this briefcase unless you are absolutely certain he has betrayed you. Not a suspicion, a certainty. When that day comes, and I pray it never does, you will know. And when you know, you will not cry. You will act." He made me memorize a phrase, a silly line from a book we used to read together when I was a child. It felt like a strange game then. Now I understood it was a key. I reached his study. The door was closed. I pushed it open and stepped inside. The room was exactly as he had left it. For a moment, the grief hit me again, a physical wave that made me want to curl up on the floor. I could almost see him in his favorite leather chair, looking up at me over his reading glasses. I took a deep breath, pushing the feeling down. I could mourn him later. Right now, I had to honor him. The briefcase was there, tucked away under the desk. It was heavy. I lifted it onto the polished wood surface. The locks were brass and old-fashioned. My father had given me the combination. Another set of numbers I had memorized without understanding. My fingers, surprisingly steady, turned the small dials. Click, click, click. With a final, loud clack, the locks sprang open. I lifted the lid. There was no money inside. My father was too smart for that. Instead, on top of a neat stack of papers was a satellite phone, a brand new passport with my picture but a name I didn't recognize, and a plain, anonymous debit card with no name on it at all. Beneath them was a single sealed envelope. My name was written on the front in his familiar, strong handwriting. My hands trembled as I opened it. The letter was short. It didn't say, "I love you." It didn't need to. The entire briefcase was a letter of love. The first instruction was simple and clear. "Clara, if you are reading this, the worst has happened. Do not waste time on tears. We prepared for this. Your real inheritance is safe. The first step is to call Mr. Graves on the phone provided. He is waiting. Use the phrase I gave you. He will tell you the rest." I picked up the satellite phone. It felt cold and heavy in my hand. I looked at my father's empty chair. He was gone, but he was still with me. He had seen this day coming and had built me a lifeboat. Alex thought he had pushed me into the ocean to drown. He had no idea I was about to sail away. My grief was a storm, but my father had given me an anchor. And now he was giving me a sword. The satellite phone felt heavy and unfamiliar in my hand, a tool from a spy movie, not something for a grieving daughter. I punched in the number from my father's letter. There was no ringing, just a series of strange clicks and a brief hiss of static. Then a voice answered, calm and immediate. "Yes." It was Mr. Graves. He had been my father's lawyer for 40 years, a man who seemed to be made of tweed and quiet wisdom. "Mr. Graves," I said, my voice steady. "It's Clara." "I know, my dear," he said, his tone gentle but all business. "I am so sorry for your loss. Arthur was the best of us." He paused for only a second. "What did he tell you to say?" I took a breath. "The rabbit in the moon is eating a carrot." The words felt foolish on my tongue, a line from a silly bedtime story my father used to read to me. "The carrot is very crunchy tonight," Mr. Graves replied without hesitation. The code was complete. "Good. Now listen carefully, Clara. Your father was a brilliant man. He was also a very cautious one. He saw the cracks in Alex's character long before you were willing to." I listened, my knuckles white as I gripped the phone. "The account Alex emptied was a decoy," he explained. "Your father and I set it up 6 months ago. We called it the honey pot. We moved the vast majority of your inheritance, the real inheritance, into a series of secure, untraceable trust accounts. Alex has no idea they exist. The money he took today, while a lot, is only a small piece of the whole. It was bait, Clara, and he took it." I sank into my father's leather chair, the room spinning for a moment. A decoy, a trap. My father, even as he was dying, was still 10 steps ahead. He had known. He had planned for the worst day of my life to make sure it wouldn't break me. "There's more," Mr. Graves continued, his voice sharp. "That specific account was insured against high-value theft. Your father paid a small fortune for that insurance policy. I have already filed the claim, and as of 20 minutes ago, I have also filed a formal criminal complaint with the police against one Alexander Peterson for the theft of the entire sum. The wheels are already turning, Clara." I closed my eyes. The money Alex stole would be returned by the insurance. The real money was safe, and the police were now looking for him. My father hadn't just built me a lifeboat, he had built me a battleship. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "You follow the rest of the instructions in that briefcase," he said. "Disappear for a little while. Let the plan work. Your father's final lesson was to teach you how to be strong on your own. It's time to learn." We hung up. I sat in the silence of the study, the satellite phone resting on the desk. My grief was still a giant, raw wound, but now it was surrounded by a wall of cold, hard purpose. Miles away, in a glittering hotel suite overlooking the city, Alex popped the cork on a bottle of champagne. The sound echoed in the room as Gina, his mistress, squealed with delight. She was a woman with expensive taste, and she was looking at the man who could finally afford her. "To us," she said, raising her glass. "To our new life. No more hiding, no more debts." Alex clinked his glass against hers, a wide, genuine smile on his face for the first time in years. He felt powerful, free. He pictured me, his poor, broken wife, probably curled up in bed, crying her eyes out over her dead father. She wouldn't even think to look at her bank account for days, maybe even weeks. By the time she noticed, he and the money would be long gone, sunning on a beach in a country that didn't ask questions. He took a long drink of the bubbling champagne. It tasted like victory. "To freedom," he said, looking out at the city lights, "and to new beginnings." He had no idea that his new beginning was already over. I didn't go to a hotel. Mr. Graves had arranged something better. I was in a small stone cottage nestled deep in the countryside, a place owned by a friend of his who was away for the season. The air here smelled of rain and damp earth, a clean scent that was a world away from the cloying sweetness of funeral lilies. I had the satellite phone, the anonymous debit card, and a laptop Mr. Graves had provided. I was a ghost, and from this quiet, safe place, I watched the trap spring. The first update came 12 hours after the funeral. The satellite phone buzzed on the simple wooden table. It was a text from Mr. Graves. "He's made his move. Attempted wire transfer to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. The bank's fraud department flagged it instantly. The honeypot is now frozen." I read the message twice. Frozen. I pictured Alex in his fancy hotel room, probably with Gina. I imagined the champagne going flat as he stared at his phone, trying to understand why the millions he had stolen were suddenly trapped behind a wall of digital ice. He would have called the bank, his voice shifting from charming to demanding, then to desperate. He would have been told it was a standard security protocol, that the account was under review. He would believe it was a temporary problem, an annoyance. He wouldn't suspect it was a cage. A strange feeling washed over me. It wasn't happiness. It was a cold, quiet satisfaction. It was the feeling of a complex machine working perfectly. My father had built this machine. He had known Alex's greed would make him predictable. He knew Alex would try to move the money quickly and carelessly. My father had used Alex's own weakness against him. I spent the rest of the day reading through the files on the laptop. They contained my father's entire investigation into Alex, bank statements showing huge credit card debts, records of loans from shady, dangerous people, emails between him and Gina, filled with promises of a lavish life he planned to build for her with my money. Seeing the proof in black and white didn't hurt as much as I thought it would. It was just data. It was evidence confirming the verdict I had already reached. The next buzz from the satellite phone came late that night, another text from Mr. Graves. Detective Miller has made contact. Alex is now officially a person of interest in a grand theft investigation. He is being watched. This was the second part of the plan, the legal pressure. I could picture Alex's panic turning to real fear. A bank freeze was one thing, a police detective was another. He would be sweating now. He would try to act innocent, to play the part of the shocked husband whose joint account had been mysteriously hacked. But the detective would see through it. My father had chosen Mr. Graves, and Mr. Graves would have chosen the best detective. Then, my own personal phone, the one I was supposed to be using, began to ring. I had kept it with me, as per my father's instructions. The screen lit up with Alex's name. He was calling me. He was looking for his escape route. He was going to play the part of the worried husband, asking where I was, telling me something terrible had happened with our money, pretending we were on the same team. He would try to use my grief and my love for him as a shield. I watched the phone ring, his name glowing on the screen. I let it go to voicemail. He called again, and again. After the fourth call, I picked up the phone. I powered it down. Then I opened the back, took out the small SIM card, and with a quiet snap, I broke the small piece of plastic in two. I dropped the pieces into the fireplace. It was a small, symbolic act. I was cutting the last line. He could no longer reach me. He could no longer use my feelings against me. He was on an island of his own making, surrounded by sharks he couldn't see, and I had just destroyed the only bridge back to shore. He was completely and utterly alone. The days in the cottage passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. I would wake up, make coffee, and sit at the wooden table with the laptop, reviewing the files my father had left me. It was like studying the anatomy of a monster. I learned about every secret debt, every lie, every betrayal. The grief for my father was a constant, deep ache, but learning about Alex's secret life didn't add to the pain. Instead, it felt like I was cleaning a wound. It was necessary. It was clarifying. Mr. Graves's updates were my only connection to the world I had left behind. They were short, factual messages that painted a picture of a man in a freefall. Alex was trapped. The police were watching him, and the stolen money was frozen, just out of his reach. He was a lion in a cage, roaring at the bars, not yet realizing the cage was about to get much smaller. The next message came on the third day. It was different. It was a phone call, not a text. "Clara," Mr. Graves said, his voice more serious than before. "The next phase has begun. Your father's research was very thorough. He knew Alex owed money to some very unpleasant people." "Loan sharks?" I asked, my voice flat. "Men who don't write polite letters when a payment is late," he confirmed. "They operate on a different set of rules. Your father knew that once word got out about Alex's new wealth, they would come to collect. They have found him." I felt a chill run down my spine, but it wasn't fear for Alex. It was the chilling realization of how perfectly my father had predicted every move. He hadn't just anticipated Alex's greed, he had anticipated the consequences of that greed. He knew the kind of vultures that circled men like my husband. "They tracked him to the hotel this afternoon," Mr. Graves continued. "The hotel security reported a heated discussion in the lobby. No physical violence, but the message was clear. They want their money. Now." I pictured it. Alex trying to use his charm on men who couldn't be charmed, men whose only language was money and fear. He would have promised them the money was coming, that it was just a bank error. They would not have believed him. "And the woman?" I asked, the word Gina feeling like ash in my mouth. "Was she there?" "She was," Mr. Graves said. "She saw the whole thing. And according to the hotel staff, she checked out less than an hour later, alone." He paused. "She took his wallet and the keys to the rental car. The hotel kicked him out shortly after for causing a disturbance. He has nothing, Clara. He's on the street." I closed my eyes. It was almost poetic. The woman he had betrayed me for, the woman he had stolen for, had abandoned him the second he was no longer useful. She saw the danger, saw that the money wasn't real, and she ran. She was just another predator, and she knew when a hunt had failed. She had picked the bones clean and moved on, so now he was truly alone. He had no money, no car, no place to stay. The police were watching him, and now dangerous criminals were hunting him. He was a ghost on the streets of a city that had once been his kingdom. He had built his life on a foundation of lies, and now the ground had given way completely. I looked out the cottage window at the calm green trees. My father's plan had worked perfectly. It had stripped Alex of everything: his money, his power, his false love. It had revealed him for what he was: a weak, desperate man. He was cornered. He was broken. A new feeling began to surface within me, pushing aside the cold satisfaction. It was control. My father had built the cage and lured the animal inside. He had left the rest to me. It was my turn to close the door. I knew what I had to do next. I was no longer just following a plan. I was going to write the ending myself. The news that Alex was on the street with nothing but the clothes on his back didn't bring me joy. It brought a profound and chilling quiet. My father's plan had been a masterpiece of logic, a series of dominoes set up with perfect precision. Now they had all fallen. Alex was stripped bare, exposed for the weak, desperate man he had always been underneath the charming smile and expensive suits. The law was closing in on one side and the criminal underworld on the other. He was finished. I could have left it there. I could have stayed in the quiet cottage, let Mr. Graves handle the rest, and waited for the news of Alex's inevitable arrest. That was the safe path. That was the path of the old Clara. But as I sat there, staring at the final text message from Mr. Graves, I realized that wasn't enough. My father had given me the tools, the map, and the armor. But he had left the final battle for me. He had taught me how to be strong, and now I had to prove to myself that I had learned the lesson. This wasn't about revenge. Revenge is a hot, messy fire. This was about justice. It was cold and clean, like a line of numbers adding up to a perfect zero. I needed to be the one to close the ledger. I needed him to look me in the eye when he finally understood that he had not been beaten by my father's ghost, but by the wife he thought was a fool. I opened the secure laptop. It had a messaging application on it, one that routed its signal through so many servers that it was completely untraceable. It was a ghost's whisper. I knew Alex would be desperate enough to be looking for any lifeline, even a digital one. He would be checking old email accounts, social media, anything that might lead to a person foolish enough to help him. I sent a message to an old, forgotten email address of his that I knew he still checked. The message itself had to be perfect. It had to be a single hook, baited with the one thing he was desperate for: hope. I typed out the words, my fingers steady on the keys. "I know you're in trouble. I can help you. Meet me." It was simple. It was direct. It was a lie. But to a drowning man, a lie that looks like a rope is better than no rope at all. Now, for the location. It couldn't be random. It had to be a place that meant something. A place that would work on his mind, to make him think he could appeal to the soft, forgiving woman he thought he had married. I thought back to the beginning, to the early days when his charm was new and his lies were still invisible to me, the gazebo in Northwood Park. It was where we had our third date. It was a small white structure, a little worn down even then, surrounded by old oak trees. It was where he first told me he loved me. He had whispered promises to me in that gazebo, promises of a future that he had never intended to build. It was the perfect stage for the final act of our tragedy. He would see the location and think of the old Clara. He would think he could manipulate me one last time. I added the location to the message and pressed send. The message disappeared from my screen, sent out into the digital void to find its target. I closed the laptop. There was nothing left to do now but wait. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't afraid. I was calm. I knew he would come. He would be suspicious, terrified even, but his desperation would be stronger than his fear. He had no one else to turn to. He had burned every bridge, except for the one he thought led back to me. I was as certain he would come as I was of the sun rising, because for all his lies I knew one fundamental truth about my husband. He was a coward, and cowards always run towards the light, even if it's the light of an oncoming train. The cool autumn air felt clean in my lungs. I stood inside the white gazebo, my hands resting on the peeling paint of the railing, and waited. I wasn't the same woman who had stood here years ago, listening to a handsome man whisper promises in my ear. That woman was gone. She had been buried along with my father. The woman standing here now was her own person, forged in grief and strengthened by purpose. I felt no flutter of nerves, only a profound and steady calm. He came from the west, walking along the path we had once walked together. He looked like a ghost, a hollowed-out version of the man I had married. His expensive suit was wrinkled and stained, his shoulders were slumped, and his eyes darted around nervously, scanning the trees for threats. He looked thin and hunted. When he saw me standing in the gazebo, a wave of desperate relief washed over his face. He thought he had found a safe harbor. He stumbled the last few steps and practically fell into the gazebo, stopping a few feet from me. "Clara?" he breathed, his voice raspy. "Thank God. I knew you'd come. I knew you'd help me." He immediately launched into the performance I knew was coming. Tears welled in his eyes. "I'm so sorry," he choked out, taking a step closer. "I was in so much trouble. I was desperate. I didn't know what to do. It was a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake." I remained silent. I let him talk. "I'll give it all back," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "Every dollar. I can fix this. We can fix this. I never stopped loving you, Clara, not for a second. It was just a moment of madness." I let the words hang in the air between us, letting them die in the quiet park. I let him empty himself of all his lies, all his pathetic excuses. When he was finally finished, panting slightly from the effort of his own act, I spoke. My voice was not loud, but it cut through the silence like a shard of glass. "There's no money to give back, Alex." He stared at me, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about? It's just frozen. I can get it unfrozen. We can go to the bank together." "No," I said, shaking my head slowly. "You don't understand. The account you emptied was a decoy. It was bait. In a trap that was set for you 6 months ago." The confusion on his face slowly curdled into dawning horror. "It was a plan my father made," I continued, my voice as even as a heartbeat. "He knew you. He saw the greed in your heart from the very beginning. He knew that on the worst day of my life, you would see an opportunity. He knew you would be cruel enough to steal from his grieving daughter. So he built a cage for you, baited it with just enough money to excite your greed, and he waited." He took a step back, his mouth opening and closing, but no sound came out. "You didn't just disrespect me, Alex," I said, my eyes locking onto his. "You underestimated the man whose memory you insulted on the day of his own funeral. You thought he was gone, but he made sure he would give me one last gift. The gift of my freedom from you." It was then that he heard it. A faint sound, a distant siren growing steadily louder. His head snapped up, and his eyes widened with a look of pure animal terror. He finally understood. This wasn't a negotiation. It was a verdict. He turned to run, but it was too late. 2 men in dark suits stepped out from behind the old oak trees. They were detectives. They didn't run. They just walked calmly towards the gazebo as Alex stood frozen in the middle of his escape. As they put the handcuffs on him, his wrists held behind his back, his eyes found mine one last time. He looked broken, defeated, a man who had been so sure he was the smartest person in the room, only to find out he was the only one who didn't know the rules of the game. I looked at him, at the man who had tried to destroy me. And I smiled back, the same calm, knowing smile I had given him at the funeral. I turned and walked away as they led him to their car. I didn't look back. The sirens faded into the distance. The air felt clean. For the first time since my father's death, I could finally breathe.